At the Alzheimer's Association Walk to End Alzheimer's, walking means so much more. It means fighting for a different future, for families facing the disease today, for treatments. Because when you take part in Walk to End Alzheimer's, you're not just walking, you're fighting to stop the disease. We're closer than ever, but to get there, we need you. Join us for the world's largest fundraiser to fight the disease. Register today at alz.org/walk.
From breathtaking cliff dives to the mega rush of free-ride mountain biking, Red Bull harnessed 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to put adrenaline on display. Relying on the strength of our 5G network, Red Bull powered POV drones to deliver unmatched views while broadcasting in real time from some of the most remote locations in America. This is heart-pounding fan experiences. This is Red Bull with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a woman learns the child she gave up for adoption disappeared decades ago under mysterious circumstances. Is her adoptive family hiding something? We'll talk about Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter from Netflix. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, our resident, Doubting Thomas, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Thursday's program.
Yeah, well, it's Thursday, so we've got a new episode of Rip Current out.
Yes, I know. But first, can you just tell us what's coming up on future shows? And then we'll talk about that.
Sure. On Monday, we're going to be talking about the podcast Dangerous Memories.
All right. So, Toby, there is a new episode of your podcast, Rip Current, out.
There is.
What's going on in that show?
So we're in episode 4, and it's sort of about what Squeaky Fromm and her friend Sandra Good were up to in Sacramento right before she committed the assassination or attempted the assassination. And what it is that they got sort of into environmentalism to some degree. And the way that kind of showed itself was sending threatening letters to CEOs and other people who they felt were harming the environment and threatening them with assassination by the fictional International People's Court of Retribution. And they also were dressing up in these weird gowns with these like kind of floppy witch hats. And they would go and actually visit CEOs at their offices dressed like this to kind of threaten them in person. So while they're doing that, they're also hanging out in Sacramento, sort of living on the margins. And that was kind of what they were doing up until the point where Gerald Ford came to town and Lynette decided to try and kill him.
California, man, was so weird in that period of time. Was it not?
It was. And that's actually, it kind of comes up in that there were 2 Mansonites in Sacramento. You didn't even bother to like check in on them before the president shows up and is walking around in public. They're like, they didn't seem like a threat. There's all kinds of weirdos. So, yeah, California in the mid-70s, there'll be more about that kind of stuff. But a lot of crazy stuff going on so that even somebody who is, a top member of the Manson family cult can kind of fly under the radar a little bit after a while.
Yeah. Michelle McNamara wrote about that in her book, I'll Be Gone in the Dark, when she was talking about, the Golden State Killer and sort of his pattern and like all the stuff. And, sort of the lack of putting the pattern together for so long because California was so nutty. And there's this whole section where she sort of talks about like all the things that were going on in California. It's something. It's not nothing. All right. So Kevin, is there something that you would like to plug before we begin the show?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody who so far has contributed to my walk a mile in their shoes. The fundraiser is for the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire. The last 2 years, you guys have helped me be the #1 fundraiser for this event. Right now I'm at number 4. A little disappointed in you guys. Thought you might dig a little deeper. I'm just kidding. The services that they offer include all sorts of stuff, including emergency shelter and other services for families at risk and in need of emergency care. They also offer things like court advocacy, housing assistance, other great services, and they really need, cash infusion to keep this going. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get dressed up in high heel shoes. Yes, it hurts me. It hurts me a lot physically and emotionally. I'm going to walk. There's also a Taylor Swift theme, so I'm going to have to incorporate that. And if you do make a little donation, I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. The link to donate is in the show notes.
Okay. Hey, my high school music teacher's wife donated to you.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
I guess my Facebook post is effective after all. Look at that. Yeah, that's my high school music teacher's wife.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Isn't that nice?
Thanks, Mrs. Pagano. Isn't
that nice?
That's very nice, Miss Pagano.
I'm sure she does not listen to this podcast and has no idea it exists. But thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Stephen and Susan. That's very nice of you. All right. We have a documentary we need to talk about. Should we get into it? Because everyone else is talking about, we may as well too.
Let's do it.
All right. Leading off.
This story is not about me. This is about a missing child. My missing child.
Cathy Terkanian learned the daughter she gave up for adoption decades earlier vanished under mysterious circumstances while a teenager. When she dug deeper into Aundria Bowman's disappearance, she learned police never investigated her adoptive father despite his history of violence.
He got out and got a rope from the back of the truck, and then he came around and he yanked me around my neck and dragged me into the woods, and I started screaming.
Convinced the Bowmans knew more than they were saying, Cathy began a crusade to force Aundria's adoptive parents to talk. Could a chance encounter between cold case detectives and evidence left 1,000 miles away be the break they've been waiting for?
It wasn't my time yet. It wasn't my daughter's time yet. But I'm going to find out what happened in Virginia to Kathleen Doyle.
From the producers of the classic The Keepers comes the 2-part Netflix series Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. It follows Cathy's journey to do right by the child she never knew and learn what happened to her. Her journey is filled with surprising twists and leaves the viewer to ponder how far is too far to seek justice for a daughter. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about very significant plot points from Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. Additional note, I am the host of Netflix's You Can't Make This Up podcast, and we did cover this documentary, but that has not influenced my review. Now, Kevin, we should mention when we say significant plot points, we're talking about the fact that this is a very twisty documentary as far as documentaries
I found it
go.
So, yeah.
Right? So this is a setup where it is a woman looking for the daughter she never knew. And when I first was watching this, I was like, oh, this is like Girl in the Picture, right? This is what we're going to be looking at. What do you think about, the setup here?
Yeah, I do like the setup. It's a woman looking for the child she never knew, and then there's a surprise, and so we go from there. One of the things I think that it probably also plays to a very common theme for women who've given up a child, where they do so in part because they think the child's going to have a better life with someone else. And then the worst possible thing is to learn that the opposite of that is true. And that is part of what is animating Cathy as she goes along. We can talk a little more about her techniques and, like you said, whether or not she goes too far and all these other things that happen. Just sort of the idea that I'm going to try to finally do right by the daughter I never knew by doing this last thing for her that no one else can, I think as a starting premise is pretty intriguing.
So, Laura, this is not The Girl in the Picture, which is obviously also not your everyday lost adopted child story, but we are going to talk about Cathy. So let's just get into it. Cathy is not your typical protagonist. She ends up finding out that her daughter that she gave up for adoption is missing because a body is discovered that a web sleuth, one of these white hat web sleuths, similar to Becky Heath and Bear Brook, who scours databases all the time and tries to match missing people with discovered bodies, believes that this person who was discovered might be Cathy's missing daughter that she gave up for adoption, and Cathy doesn't even know that her daughter had been missing. She takes a DNA test, finds that the body is not that of her missing daughter. She and this web sleuth end up teaming up and becoming like a detective pair and decide to find out what actually happened to her missing daughter that she gave up for adoption. But she is not typical.
No, I find her to be like, I think there's definitely some guilt of having given up the child for adoption that she didn't want to give up. And she can come across as a little bit overbearing and a little bit over the top in the way that she is pursuing this that can be a little off-putting, I think, to some people.
I jumped up in the middle of the room. I said, you tell these people who your husband is.
And then all of a sudden, everybody got startled and there was a little bit of commotion.
I had a cup of coffee in my hand all that morning, and I had that cup of coffee, I'd have thrown it right in her face.
There's times when she's like flying a drone around over this guy's house and like convinced that there's something going on. But I think it's like she starts this Facebook group and just kind of takes over and is going to be the one to, in her mind, she's like, I was a teenage runaway. I had this like violent childhood. I ran away. The police didn't look for me the way they should have. Like, why are they going to look for my daughter? I'm going to just take matters into my own hand. And she just kind of launches in a way that is like so determined, but like singularly focused in a way that it takes over her life completely. And she is stuck on certain ideas. She doesn't want to hear other ideas. Like she gets an idea in her head and she's just like, this is it, this is it, this is it. And in the end, yeah, she was right. But do the means justify the end? But I think also it was interesting because of the way that she started that Facebook group. She's learning a lot about the life that her daughter had with her adopted family. And she's finding out these friends that are reaching out that are telling her like they made them eat like, what was it, like ketchup, relish, and mustard sandwiches, and they couldn't eat food, and like that it wasn't really a nice situation. So again, that guilt thing that I was saying before is like, now the guilt is triggered again because she's like, oh my God, I gave this child up and now she was in this horrible situation and these people were not nice to her. And this was probably an abusive home. But she's definitely, at times, I hate to say this, at times I felt her to be kind of a difficult character to root for.
Well, one of the things that she finds out pretty early on in looking into the parents is that Denny had a prior arrest for a violent sexual assault and had been in prison, and that the police never looked into him when her daughter went missing. And so that's not nothing for her to have the suspicion of him. But yes, this is a question that I think the viewer is challenged to ask. And judging by a note that Toby sent me before we started recording, I know that Toby has feelings about Cathy's actions and her behavior toward the Bowmans after she begins suspecting that they had something to do with Aundria's disappearance. Right, Toby?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the fact that you, in the end, turn out to be right doesn't necessarily mean that what you were doing when that hadn't been determined yet is... I mean, she basically criminally harasses these people. Like one of the first things is getting a drone ready to fly over their house. She talks very proudly about calling them at all times of the day and night and like yelling at them.
At one point, I called them up. And of course, the machine answers, and I like just rip into them until the machine goes beep. And I called them right back. And I ripped into them, and the machine went beep. And I called them right back. Beep. Do you know they disconnected their phone that next week?
She's harassing them based on her knowledge of the arrest and then I guess kind of gut instinct, but she doesn't know for sure. And like, quite honestly, is that the way you want people who have instincts about things to act towards people they think might be guilty of something? I mean, we've gone through so many things where people who are thought to be guilty turn out to be innocent. And if that was the case with this, she's just making these people's lives miserable. So I don't like to make judgments about people like in general, just based on watching 3 hours of a documentary. And, there's all these decisions that the director makes and all this stuff. So I don't really know what she's like or whatever, but the way it's portrayed, I kind of thought was troubling. And it didn't seem as though it was stuff that was really going to help the case along. It seemed more like something that she wanted to do just because she was feeling vengeful. It was tough when I was watching. I'm like, this is kind of crazy the way that she's acting towards these people.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if being right absolves you of bad behaviors, and especially like, verging on criminal harassment. I mean, even the Bowmans went to the police, and the police, had to patiently listen to the facts that, maybe Cathy is going on too much. Now, ironically, it's because of this that kind of pushes them to the ability to get Dennis's DNA, because he drank a glass of water while he was there and it could connect to other things. But, when we hear her doing like her phone calls and other things, like going to the conferences and renting billboards, I mean, it's a little cheeky. It's also effective. But, baby reindeer calling the family at all hours and just, I mean, I don't know if that really was productive. And it certainly gives us, the viewers, something to talk about. It's like, I don't know if that was the right thing to do. She might have been correct all along about the fact that the body was buried in the backyard when nobody believed it. But, that also could be, it's mother's intuition. Or it also could just be that you're acting up and acting out, but you just also happen to be correct about it.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you in principle at all. At all. Okay? I'm going to say something, though, that's like just counter to it a little bit. He's a fucking serial killer, the dude, right? And it is so hard when you finish watching this. And I turned to you, Kevin, and I was like, this reminds me of our conversation about, we did an episode on Outside In about this. And we've talked about it on this show, too. We were talking about Leah Satili's podcast about, so-called environmental terrorists, like people who go really far, breaking actual laws. But the planet is fucking on fire. And in 100 years, we're going to look back and be like, they were fucking right? Some of us are saying that now. What makes this hard is that he didn't just murder her daughter. He's a fucking serial killer. And, my worry is that you see something like this and she's portrayed as heroic because she was right. And I worry about what it will potentially inspire other people to do who are not right.
Exactly.
Like that is the concern.
It's like the mob mentality.
That is the concern. And then it's the concern I have around like the Karen Reed case and the protesters. It's because it's like, I believe that a lot of what they have to say, talking about corruption in the Massachusetts State Police is right, and it's bearing out. Like if you look at the Sandra Birchmore case, for instance, in the town of Stoughton and in the town of Canton, and then what we're seeing also with the corruption that's happening in the Massachusetts State Police, like they're not wrong. There is corruption there. And then there's other stuff going on that like I just can't condone, but it's distraction and it's not good. And it's setting up stuff that's like giving the corrupt authorities talking points that are taking away from the validity of the message. So I can't disagree with anything you're saying. But he's a fucking serial killer. He's a fucking serial killer.
Right, but if you agree that Cathy did cross the line, the other victim of her criminal acts is Brenda, who also received the brunt of that harassment, although while she may have some moral ambiguity here and some other questions, she's not accused of a crime. So
those are the two big questions in the documentary. Is Brenda and Cathy's behavior. Those are like
those are two great questions.
Those are the two really, really big questions. So I think that that's absolutely a valid, completely valid thing. And I think the documentary is challenging us to ask that question. So Toby, you also had concerns tonally about the documentary. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it. I mean, I think the two big issues are how it views those two women. And I do think Cathy is the protagonist of this story, right? I mean, you don't actually hear anybody push back against her except for Brenda and Denny, but there's nobody who's like, maybe you shouldn't be doing this, or is this really ethical? And then with Brenda, there is like zero sympathy for her at the end. Like all you hear is people talking about how she should be in jail too, and she's just as culpable, and how dare she give me half of my daughter's ashes? She should give them all to me, and all this stuff. And you could just have easily have gone and been like, oh, well, she was the other victim, right? It would be very surprising if she was not the victim of abuse. Like something weird would be happening for that to be the case. And I think you can see, and again, I was a little uncomfortable with the amount of time they spent dwelling on this stuff, is this very strange relationship they have with each other. And I think it's probably born from trauma and then continued through other kinds of trauma. But they do seem like they're like the only two people in the world for each other, right? They're in that mode. So like Cathy isn't an evil person, but there's very little pushback about things that I think are problematic and that we have seen people do than before. I think about even in the very early days of all this stuff with like Jay Wilde and like people showing up to his house and taking photographs of his kids and stuff because they think he's guilty. I mean, it's the same freaking thing. And then I think we've certainly seen other things where the wife of the serial killer is portrayed as another victim. And in this, that's not it at all. She is not given any possibility of that. You hear Cathy just being pissed off at her and feeling as though she has more right to the ashes of a daughter who she gave birth to, but that this other woman actually raised. So I don't know. I just kind of felt like there were decisions that were made about, you know, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy, who's got culpability that, you know, I don't know if they stand up to sort of that kind of black and white scrutiny. And I think it would have been very easy to make a completely different documentary where they don't necessarily change roles, but is a little more nuanced in how their actions affected the life of Aundria and so on. So I didn't like this. I think probably other people will. And that was like a big reason why.
Yeah, I mean, you're basically coming up with the idea, the question of like, should one stand by and not do something that like you really should, like supporting us on Patreon?
Oh yes.
Are you just gonna stand by?
Exactly, Kevin.
And just like not support us and sustain us so that we can keep doing all these podcasts?
It's just like that.
Yeah, I mean, you're supporting probably a bunch of creators out there on Patreon. Everybody is, and we'd love for you to also support us because we think provide a good value for the buck. I mean, if you join us at the leading off level, you get all sorts of like really cool stuff like the Crime Writers on After Show, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, and our advice podcast, Married with Podcast. If you join us at the Bricker scale level, you get an additional exclusive podcast. It's Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker. And if you are a supporter at the Let's Do What We Do level, you get episodes of Crime Writers on early and ad-free. And if you're a deep diver, if you're up there as one of the deep divers, not only will you get all that good stuff, but you'll also get to take part in Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast when they record. You can throw in a comment or be part of the conversation when you read the book. Now, other ways that you can support us is we have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things. Rebecca, what are this week's Amazon recommendations?
I actually have one, Kevin.
Good, because that's your job.
I want to recommend something that I have bought now twice that I really, really love. If you like good bedding and you don't want to spend a fortune, I bought this really beautiful linen duvet cover, which is great for summer and fall. It comes in this gorgeous rust color. Kevin, I look familiar?
No, it looks like rust.
Yeah, you can buy this thing on like an expensive catalog like Garnet Hill or like Pottery Barn or something for like a couple $100. You can get a gorgeous linen duvet cover on Amazon for like $70. It is beautiful. It's called Simple and Opulence. And I got the queen size one and I got the color rust. I have now bought it twice because we used our first one so much that it wore out. Gorgeous duvet cover, Simple and Opulence French linen duvet cover in the color rust. Okay, and Toby Ball, what are your listener-inspired deep cut recommendations?
Yeah, I'm going to recommend a couple things I have never ordered. First one is hiking and running thin moleskin for blisters and feet. World Champion 2023 DecaFit and Spartan Elite Ultra Champion's Choice. Military tested 408 square. So it's a world champion moleskin, apparently. Don't know what that means.
Okay.
Following up with that, the Casa indoor pan/tilt smart security camera, 1080 pixel high definition dog camera, 4 gigahertz with night vision motion detection for baby and pet monitor, cloud and SD card, ST.
Wow. That's incredible.
There's a lot of stuff going on. Babies or pets, either one, it's fine. Like so many things in life.
Could I put that on so I could watch my cats when I'm at my office?
Yeah, that sounds
That's what it's for.
Sounds good. So how do you help us by checking out these recommendations or doing your regular shopping? Well, just change the way you get to Amazon. You go to Amazon.com, but then go to Amazon.com/shop/Crime Writers On, and then you can see our recommendations while you do the rest of your shopping. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin, before we end the business section, I have to ask, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Autumn Cox and Andy Perry. Bless you.
Bless you, Autumn. Bless you, Andy. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. Thanks for everybody who supports us there. Thanks for everybody who's considering it. And thanks for everybody who just doesn't and listens to the business section anyway. We appreciate everyone who listens to this podcast, but especially those who support us on Patreon. It really helps us get our work done. All right, Kevin, does thus end the business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. Kevin, who's sponsoring us right now?
Okay, we're brought to you by Quince.
Quince?
Yeah, hey, like we're into fall right now, and it's back to school, and so all those short shorts, tank tops, all those, cool linen clothes that would be, those are all going in the closet. You got to get ready for
It's cashmere sweater time.
It's cashmere. If you're going to go out and get decorative gourds.
Yes.
Miniature decorative gourds.
Decorative gourd season.
Yes, that's right. You got to shift your wardrobe. Luckily, Quince offers timeless and high-quality items that you'll adore, ensuring your wardrobe stays fresh and you don't blow your budget. And remember, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
Yes, they sure are. I love Quince so much, Kevin.
Yeah.
I was actually shopping on Quince earlier today on my phone while I was editing something.
Mm-hmm.
There's something I want so badly.
Tell me.
It's a cashmere cardigan. Of course it is. It's so cute.
But does it break the bank?
No, of course it doesn't break the bank.
Then I'll allow it.
Oh,
I will allow it.
Thanks for allowing it.
Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. How awesome is that?
Make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials, like a crop cashmere sweater. Go to quince.com/crime for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Hey, everybody. It's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is supported by FX's Grotesquerie, a new series from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Heinous crimes unsettle a small community, and the local detective feels these atrocities are eerily personal, as if someone or something is taunting her. Starring Niecy Nash Betts, Courtney B. Vance, Leslie Manville, and Travis Kelce. FX's Grotesquerie premieres September 25th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
Want to connect with a family member who doesn't speak your language? Then check out the language learning program Rosetta Stone on desktop or as an app. Rosetta Stone is designed to immerse you in the language you're learning through an intuitive process. Plus, the True Accent feature even gives you feedback on your pronunciation. And with a lifetime membership, you have access to all 25 offered languages. Get started today. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to get 50% off your lifetime membership now. That's rosettastone.com/pod50 for 50% off.
All right, so Laura, one thing that I'd just like to tell you as far as background goes is how this documentary was made.
Okay.
It is based on an article that was printed in The Atavist that Charlize Theron found and brought to this documentarian and encouraged him to make into a documentary.
Okay.
And it's sort of about Cathy Terkanian and this guy that she paired up with it's sort of about the two of them and sort of the journey they did, that, as you see in the documentary. But a thing that you should know is that they've actually solved several other cases since also solving this one. And they've also identified other murders that they very strongly believe in, that the police are investigating now, that Dennis may have committed other crimes and other murders that he may have committed. So they haven't stopped kind of like working together, these two. They've become like a sleuthing pair, which is just an interesting thing to know.
Cathy and Carl, the accountant?
Yes, they have become like a...
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
They should be like a little sitcom.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, actually. Anyway, one of the things that was interesting to me is the other victim of Dennis, Meta, who 100% knew it was him.
Mm-hmm.
And her coming forward and her being able to tell that story. What did you think of that part of the documentary?
Yeah, that was pretty remarkable because, so Meta, she's from Holland. She was kidnapped. She was sexually assaulted. It was around the same time that Aundria goes missing, and she escapes. And rather than just like escaping and being like, oh shit, I'm alive, I'm done with this, she starts kind of doing some sleuthing. And they look at this map and they look at where this happened, and they're like, okay, like this is kind of in his area. And she believes that her attacker is Dennis. And so she contacts Cathy about this. So that's very empowering for somebody who has gone through something like that to not only escape and get away, but also follow up to the point that she actually had pretty concrete information and was able to do something with that. So that was interesting. That was definitely like, I was like, oh, good for her.
I was walking along here and he saw me and he came and he parked right here alongside this sidewalk. And he just said, your mom said I could take you to go see some puppies. We're gonna go to a barn and see some puppies. So I was close enough for him where he just grabbed me, put me in his red pickup truck.
So Kevin, that was the first twist in the documentary, was discovering that Dennis was maybe a bad guy, right?
Yeah. I like the way that was revealed.
After hearing this, like, you know, Aundria grew up and then all of a sudden she became troubled, which, by the way, you did turn to me and said something happened to her, which is why she became troubled. So that was the first twist. The second is the cliffhanger at the end of episode 1, where police come to arrest Dennis, and they are not arresting him for this. They are arresting him for a whole other murder that was committed on the East Coast, the murder of Kathleen Doyle. Thoughts?
Yeah, I thought that cold case detective really had a flair for the dramatic.
Can you go tell me why I was arrested? Absolutely, I'm going to tell you why you're arrested. I'm the guy that you have been looking over your shoulder, waiting for to show up for most of your life. And now it's here.
Cops really talk that way, eh?
Yeah, I guess.
That one does.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's just like we had, no idea this was something, that he was involved in. So, again, it was a nice little reveal the way that they did that. And again, it's just like, hey, another big victory for that genetic genealogy stuff, where they're like, hey, we'll just take this sample and we'll just see all the different people that are involved. And, again, great job with the dumb luck of cold case detectives just swapping stories and shooting the shit and like, oh yeah, hey, it could be your guy. I feel like there needs to be like a private database system just for law enforcement doing cold cases about patterns and clues and familial DNA, as opposed to maybe needing to bump into each other at regional conferences and just be lucky saying, hey, does this name sound familiar? But again, it's a lot of these cases don't get solved because you're the smartest detective in the world. They get solved because you get lucky, and that's what they needed was luck.
Yeah. So Toby, you weren't surprised by that twist at the end of episode 1?
I just don't think it's that surprising that somebody who, has been kind of set up as being abusive and possibly a murderer and certainly violent. I mean, there's no question about the attempted rape that he was in prison for. Like, I just, when that thing happened, I was like, oh yeah, well, it sort of checks out. Like, it's not like he's just going to do it here or there. Like, it doesn't seem like any of these things were like situational crimes, or it's like the typical crime of passion, or there was some kind of confrontation or whatever. It's like this guy was out like trying to find women and girls in situations where they were vulnerable and then harm them. So that just kind of, to me, made me think, well, I don't think we know all of the instances of this, or that it would just have been confined to this small little group of things that we've heard about. So when it's like, oh yeah, well, he might have done something else, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that kind of checks out. That would seem to be what you'd expect. I don't know why. Like, I guess it probably, maybe on a different night or something, I would have been like, oh shit, that's a different murder.
I was.
But at the time, I was just like, oh, okay, well, there's another one. So I guess they're going to go at him that way.
Yeah, I guess maybe I was very much in the mood to watch this in a way that, okay, I'll just say it. I have not watched a true crime documentary in a long time that I felt was like a generally well-constructed, somewhat surprising narrative. And I thought when I watched this that, it was kind of going in a direction we'd seen before. And then it took some hard turns that honestly did surprise me. They honestly really, really did. And when the cops showed up and arrested him for that, I think that the documentary does a good job sort of doing this slow build with Dennis's character and his evilness, where, yes, you're introduced to the idea that he's an abusive dad. and that he probably sexually abused his daughter, and that he was a dick to his kids, and that, the friends start testifying to that, and that, he may or may not have been a local creep who attacked women, and that maybe he may not be this person who assaulted this girl in the woods. That is, to me, a very fucking far cry from breaking into someone's house and murdering them on a business trip. To me, there's a difference between somebody who commits crimes close to home and somebody who, in a strange city, is breaking into a stranger's house through a window and murdering them. To me, that there's a Golden State Killer type serial killer, and then there's the person who sexually abuses their daughter and attacks people close to home. I mean, to me, it just surprised me. And I think the documentary did a build that made you think he was the local creep. And then it just did that thing. And it did surprise me. It really did. So maybe that's just me, because I just wasn't expecting that to be the thing. So I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that. But Laura, you have a note here too that indicates that you weren't particularly surprised.
I won't say I wasn't surprised by the murder part. I guess I just wasn't surprised that he was more of a creep and that he had committed other crimes.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay. You just kind of get the vibe that there was something that was off. I was like, okay, so that's not terribly surprising. I think what was interesting was just that he wasn't in Virginia that long when that murder took place. It was a very long ago crime, and it was not something where he was there for months or years. It was he was there for 2 weeks or something?
And he was bored. So I'm going to kill somebody.
Yeah, it was. So that was I was like, okay, where does that come from? So I think the thing about this that I would have liked a little more context on was a little bit more about his background, and also his wife Brenda's background, to go to what Toby was saying before about Brenda's role in this, and Brenda being the other victim. Brenda obviously declined to participate. They said that. I was curious what her life was like. And we saw some of it in that crazy, remarkable video where he's, quote, confessing to her.
He laid out there for a couple of days. And I found a cardboard barrel. And I tried to stick her body in the barrel. It wouldn't fit. Honey, in order to make it fit, I had to cut her legs off.
How could she have not known any of this stuff?
Yeah.
Or did she know? And she was just fucking terrified.
Yeah.
Well, was she in total
or was
denial?
she terrified? Or was she?
Or was she whatever, I'm going to just pretend I don't know about it?
Yeah, because the friends indicated that she was a participant in the abuse too. So it is very, very hard to tell. And it's very, very hard to know if she
Participant or an enabler?
An enabler. It's hard to tell. It's hard to know. And she doesn't indicate that he was physically abusive to her, but we don't know that, obviously. He could have been psychologically or physically. We obviously don't know much about Brenda. And that is another question in the documentary.
Well,
That's the big question.
I think that's the real water cooler topic, right, that people are gonna have is what is making Brenda tick? What is the real nature of that marriage? When you see, we get to see, these intimate, I guess, they know they're recorded, but to the extent that these phone calls from prison, they seem sincere in the way they relate to one another. So I'm wondering does everybody see this relationship as, are they codependent? Is he just using her? If so, why is he willing to give up all this stuff just so that she could be closer, even though they're just going to meet on video? She says, I wish you'd remembered 40 years ago, you loved me then, so you didn't kill somebody or whatever.
I love you. 40 years ago, you should have thought of that.
40 years ago, I was going nuts, though.
40 years ago, I wish the hell you never would have went to Virginia.
Yeah, me too.
Do we feel like this is just unconditional, all-forgiving love? Or is this just super weird codependency?
Everything he confesses to her, she's it reminded me of when people sort of worship somebody in the public sphere, they can do no wrong. It's she'd be shocked in the moment about something that he confessed to her, and then it would be well, okay, I can accept that too.
Yeah.
Oh, you killed her? That's horrible. I can't believe it. Oh, but it was an accident? Oh, okay. I guess it's okay.
Right, but he continues to minimize. I mean, even the stuff that he admits to, he minimizes it, right? So he's like, for Cathy Doyle, he says, "Oh, I just, we just kind of
The knife slipped.
The knife, just the tip of the knife," and we know, like, stabbed multiple times, raped, and then so his excuse for the way that Aundria dies is that they struggled and she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Well, this guy's got to be like the most unluckiest serial killer. Who are just like, oh, everybody just happens to die around him. You're not buying that for a second, but that's his story, and he stuck to it. She just happened to die, so, by accident, so I got to cover it up by cutting up her body.
And now I got to cut her legs off.
Yeah.
I mean, that wasn't my fault.
Yeah,
exactly.
She wouldn't fit in the barrel. I had to cut her legs off.
I mean, so Toby, aside from what you said earlier about, the lens through which you see this, where it's particularly like Cathy's lens, we do see footage of the two of them interacting, Dennis and Brenda, and you do see, that so-called confession, which honestly was very surprising to me because there was police in the room, but they gave them permission and so forth. And I'm like, spousal privilege, man, what the fuck is going on here? I don't understand. But did you get the sense that it was a codependent relationship? Did you get the sense that Brenda is just like a ride or die? Because I also got the sense that Dennis ultimately just doesn't care that much, that he's just she is very useful to him in many ways.
Yeah, I mean, I evaluating a relationship based on the most traumatic moments in that relationship, I think is tough. I mean, she just kind of seemed like she didn't want to be too judgmental of him, and he was, whether he was sincere or not, was trying to admit to things but also minimize them at the same time, and felt like he needed her, if not forgiveness, at least kind of understanding that, his claims that he was sorry. I guess they're sort of documentary gold kind of footage type things. It did feel to me like a little bit intimate and uncomfortable to be watching it for the amount of time that they kind of left the things rolling, especially if they're going to not be sympathetic to her in the slightest. It kind of, to me, that felt a little uncomfortable because after watching that and just letting people go off on her about how she's culpable, that seemed a little like a strange choice to me. But yeah, I mean, it's, as Kevin was saying, I think that's the big question, or one of the big questions, is what was kind of the nature of the relationship? How much did she know? I mean, she probably at least suspected something. And then why didn't she do anything to stop it? Was it fear? Was it deference? Was it, folie à deux? Was she a sadist as well? I don't know the answer to that.
So, Laura, many of the events of this documentary happened before they started filming, but one of them that happened while they were filming was the scene in the courtroom where there is this hearing, and then what happens behind a closed door is that Brenda, wants to give Cathy half of the ashes of Cathy's birth daughter. What did you think of this and Cathy's reaction to it?
Well, I think this is really hard because we want to demonize Brenda. I had a hard time, like I said, at times rooting for Cathy because of the way that she went about doing what she did. So on one hand, you're like, Brenda didn't need to do that at all. And that was generous of her. But then Cathy obviously doesn't see it that way.
And she wants to give you half of Aundria's body. I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this right now. Would she give me the top half or the bottom half? Oh, dear her.
I don't feel like there's any winners in that situation. I don't feel like anybody was going to come out of that feeling like, I'm happy with this resolution. Like from the outside, you're like, okay, this was like equal. And this is the woman who gave birth to her. This is the woman who raised her. She's trying in her mind to do what she thinks is the right thing, kind of backfires. It was just really hard because it's like we've talked about recently when we were talking about the last thing we reviewed, we're talking about like people's remains and why do people have this sort of connection to cremains, and does it really even matter? But it's for the living, not the dead. And it's like, you can see how Cathy, because she just became so focused on this case, felt like there was only one outcome, which was her getting all these remains. So it was just hard. It was a hard scene.
Hey, everybody, it's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically, it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
This episode is supported by FX's Grotesquerie, a new series from executive producer Ryan Murphy. Heinous crimes unsettle a small community, and the local detective feels these atrocities are eerily personal, as if someone or something is taunting her. Starring Niecy Nash Betts, Courtney B. Vance, Leslie Manville, and Travis Kelce. FX's Grotesquerie premieres September 25th on FX. Stream on Hulu.
Want to connect with a family member who doesn't speak your language? Then check out the language learning program Rosetta Stone on desktop or as an app. Rosetta Stone is designed to immerse you in the language you're learning through an intuitive process. Plus, the True Accent feature even gives you feedback on your pronunciation. And with a lifetime membership, you have access to all 25 offered languages. Get started today. Visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to get 50% off your lifetime membership now. That's rosettastone.com/pod50 for 50% off.
Everywhere you look, things are getting more expensive. So at Consumer Cellular, we're lowering the price for those 50 and up. Now you can get unlimited talk, text, and data for $30 a line when you buy two. That's just $60 a month for 2 unlimited lines. So if you're 50 and up, make the switch and save. Come on, you've earned this. Call 1-888-FREEDOM or visit consumercellular.com today. Requires 2 lines of service, age validation, and credit approval, subject to system and area limits, taxes, and other fees apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter? I'm going to actually change the order on this. What? Toby Ball, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter?
Yeah, I really disliked this. I felt as though just from the very beginning, I wasn't clear. It seemed like a lot of stuff was being reenacted without you being filled in. And maybe that my questioning that sort of set the tone for the whole thing. I just kind of felt like they sort of painted certain people black and white where I think there was a lot of gray. I'm like the worst person at seeing twists coming. I can never, like, even on the stupidest show, like guess who did it or whatever. But I didn't find any of these twists to be particularly surprising. Didn't find myself identifying or being very sympathetic with the protagonist who's in this. It's a very kind of lurid, sad story in a lot of ways. And I don't know if it was handled in a way with sort of the gravity that maybe it deserved. And there's also these long periods of like this very sort of emotionally charged discussions towards the end. And they really get lingered on. And it's two people who are sort of portrayed with various degrees of disdain and judgment. And being that was sort of the attitude taken towards these people, to me, those scenes kind of felt exploitive because it wasn't supposed to be giving you a nuance or anything else. It was just like, look at these two people and the shit that's gone on. So anyway, I really didn't like this at all. I was actually kind of surprised when we were having the discussion that I was so much more negative than everybody else. But I guess that's why I'm going first.
That's why you're the captain of cynicism, Toby.
So thumbs down for me. And it's not even just a minor thumbs down. It's a big, big thumbs down. Sorry, Charlize Theron. I've liked you in a lot of movies, but this isn't for me.
Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for Into the Fire, The Lost Daughter?
So I'm a mild thumbs up on this. On one hand, this is kind of a straightforward true crime documentary. 2 parts. We've got access to the families. We've got internet sleuths. We've got a case that's kind of a cold case that's interesting. There's some twists. There's like, oh, this is happening. And some of them I was like, yeah, I'm not so surprised by that one. But there were twists. There were turns. There were characters that I felt conflicted about. There were characters that I knew I probably should like, that I didn't like. And in the end, I was like, okay, I didn't love this, but it was a pretty interesting, straightforward true crime documentary about a case that was basically investigated from a very kind of non-traditional approach from somebody that hadn't necessarily been involved in the life of the victim. So a mild thumbs up for me.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm going thumbs up on this one. I feel like the most interesting part of the documentary are the people involved, particularly Cathy and Brenda, the two mothers here, and sort of the things that are animating them, I think, are the things to think about. And if you talk about this with somebody that you know that's already seen it, I think these are the things you're going to talk about. You won't be talking about Dennis. You're going to be talking more about Cathy and Brenda. The premise is really interesting from the start here, that you have a mother who feels like in the end that she needs to sort of redeem herself and redeem her sense of maternal instinct after giving up her child for adoption that many years ago and finding out what her fate became. So it's a little bit of a redemption story, but I think it has a bunch of other things going on here that make it an interesting watch. So I'm gonna go with a thumbs up.
I'm going thumbs up too, and I actually really disagree with a lot of what Toby said about this. I actually think it has a much more nuanced portrayal of Brenda than Toby does. The one thing that's missing that may have solved...
Toby, you going to take that from that woman?
No, it's okay.
She's got the last word, man.
It's okay. No, I mean, I could understand how one could see it the way that Toby saw it. I didn't see it that way. I think what's missing that would change the perspective that some might have, that some might share with Toby, is there's no pushback to anyone in this. Nobody's asking Cathy the question on camera, do you think you went too far? Nobody's asking those kinds of questions on camera and challenging her. We're just seeing it. We're seeing it. We're letting her do it. And she does not come off great in a lot of this documentary to me. In a lot of this documentary, I'm like, whoa. And to me, there's a commentary there on the behavior of people who are in these kinds of positions or who feel very heated up by a circumstance like this. The difference between Cathy, though, and like a Karen Reed activist is that she actually found a fucking serial killer, right? And there's a line there that just raises a lot of questions. And I don't agree with a lot of what she did. I cannot be clear enough about that, but it does make the questions feel higher stakes in this particular instance. Very similar to Don't Fuck with Cats, right? Like those people who became completely obsessed and this is all that they did. And then they fucking found the guy. So there's like a lot there that I think is worth chewing on. And I think that there's, some nuance that I saw that Toby didn't. So I liked it a lot more than he did. And so, yeah, I'm giving it a big fucking solid thumbs up. I thought it was well constructed and the twists did surprise me. And I fucking see everything coming. That's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, I have a question for you. Do we have a cat of the week this week?
We actually have a dog of the week this week.
Yeah, my favorite animal.
This comes to us from Jennifer Mel. A very cute picture came in on my Instagram DMs.
Nice.
You never know what you're going to get on your Instagram
Love
DMs.
the DMs.
Yep.
If you're Laura Bricker, you know what you're getting on your DMs.
I guess so. This is Charlie, 3-year-old English Springer Spaniel, new to our family from the English Springer Spaniel Rescue America.
Nice.
He is experiencing all kinds of firsts, car rides, walks on a leash, his very own family. He enjoys eating grass and being near his people while they listen to Crime Writers On and sleeping.
That's
a worthy dog. That's a worthy dog.
He's a very cute dog. He's totally worthy. He's very, very cute.
Yes.
All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you, maybe DM you on Instagram or find you on the other platforms, what is your handle?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Twitter and Instagram.
And of course, you can always email us at crimewriterson@gmail.com with your suggestions for Pet of the Week. But, I think DMing Laura, I think that's kind of the way to go. Clearly, it's effective.
It's effective.
Toby Ball, folks want to reach out to you and ask you their questions about Squeaky Fromm. How can they find you online?
Yeah, I'm on more places these days. So TikTok and Twitter, it's at TobyBallNH. And on Instagram, it's at TobyBall603. And, Facebook and shit.
Kevin Flynn, how can you be found?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And you can find Crime Writers On all the platforms at Crime Writers On. Of course, you can join our incredible Facebook group. I say it every week that you should join it. You really should. The people there are rad. Get episodes early and ad-free and all the other stuff we make on Patreon at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You can join for $5 or $6 if you want, or you can join a higher tier to get episodes early and ad-free. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this show is Kevin Flynn. This program was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where our marriage is also filled with deadly secrets and a creepy sense of codependence. It kind of is. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later.
And the don't fuck with cats guys, like they misidentified somebody in like Botswana who ended up having their life ruined and stuff. I mean, it's
raised a lot of the same questions.
Amateur fucking sleuth business is. Anyway,
you got to be a real sleuth like me.
That's right. Get a license. Get a pet license. God damn it.
Yeah. Leave it to the cat detectives, people.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I do like, the sort of the premise here that it's, looking for the daughter that she never knew. Sorry, Libby, it's ragweed or whatever.
Sure. It's the cocaine.
Pollen.
in crime media.
Hey, everybody, it's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically, it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.